Decisions.
Wait a minute. Are you still looking for cars on Carvana?
Yeah, decisions.
When I used Carvana, I found the exact car I was looking for in minutes. Bought it on the spot.
Electric or full diesel? Decisions.
Come on, you've been at it for weeks. Just buy it already.
You're right. Crossover it is. Decisions decided.
Whether you know exactly what you want or like to take your time, buy your car the convenient way with Carvana.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
Hey, it's Austin James. If you're like me, trying to live your best life while living with diabetes, you can relate to worrying if you're doing a good job managing your diabetes. I use the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor to get real-time glucose readings and see the impact of every meal and activity to make better decisions. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor can help me live life with diabetes on my own terms, and it gives me more time for the things I love, like being a dad and a musician. Now this is progress. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. I'm not going to laugh, I was chuckling then, because any pod that starts with Kieran saying, I think if I press this button, we should be all right. 3, 2, 1, go, and we didn't break the internet, so that's good. Right, Kieran, how are you? I have to say, A, it looks even more like a hostage video than normal. B, you appear to be wearing a shirt that has 5 Brighton and Hove Albion kits on it.
Well, both issues probably correct. Yeah, I'm in my office in Liverpool. This is the last podcast we record before the biggest match of the season, or one of the 2 biggest matches of the season. And so we'll be professional and wait for the good thing on Sunday when the match takes place, that even if Brighton are winning at 88 minutes, you ain't going to lose.
Well, I was going to suggest that shirt was professionally provocative, Kieran, but as I've got a picture behind me of Benteke and Philippe Mateta scoring 2 goals against Brighton, it's Newsday, Kieran, and it's not often I say this, but the first story is us. We've got some news for our lovely listeners, and basically it's the news that Kieran and Guy have gone mad. They've gone Del Boy mad with this new special offer. I'm not normally the grinchy one, but we've been teasing you about some changes coming up, and the changes are here. But these 2 are giving it away. They're giving it away, I'll tell you. We could charge £100 a week for what we're about to offer, this new package. Because yes, we have some exciting news. This week we are launching the brand new, get ready for this, Price of Football Club, through our good friends at Supporting Cast. Now, we've beefed up... you wrote this bit, didn't you? We've beefed up our membership offering. So the benefits of signing up now include ad-free listening. You had that already if you paid for Patreon. Now, access to the full back catalogue. Extra questions episodes. So we're going to be doing a topical questions episode once a month. You get access to that. Early access to our interviews. Early access to live tickets, a monthly Zoom Q&A where you can actually see us, a monthly Zoom Q&A, and of course the invitation to Zoom quizzes. I'll go over that again because you won't then believe the price we're offering that for. So ad-free listening, access to every single pod we've ever done, extra questions episodes, 1 a month, early access to interview episodes, early access to live tickets, monthly Zoom Q&A, an invitation to Zoom quizzes, and you can get all of that for £3.99 a month. £3.99 a month, or £39.99 a year. And there's even talk of a pre-Christmas reduction, which I'm too excited already, Kieran. I can't read out the potential pre-Christmas extra value deduction. So that £3.99 a month or £39.99 a year. Our regular Tuesday questions episodes and Thursday news episodes will still be available for free and always will be in the existing feed. But when you sign up, you'll get access to that Price of Football Club feed, which will be totally ad-free and full of bonus content. So sign up for the Price of Football Club today by going to priceoffootball.com and following the links. Now, to all of our existing Patreon subscribers, please feel free to cancel your existing subscription and then start a new one by following the links on the website. Our Patreon page and feed will keep running for now, but it will be turned off at the end of February. So normally, minor celebrities like me get to turn on some Christmas lights, but all I've got this year is turning off Patreon in February. The bonus content won't appear on the Patreon feed, so make the switch today so you don't miss anything. So sign up now if you're not a member already, and transfer today if you're an existing Patreon subscriber, or give membership of the Price of Football Club as a gift to your loved ones this Christmas. Thanks as always for listening and supporting the show. I'm not sure how that gift to your loved ones this Christmas works, because clearly they're not listening to the pod as it happens. So whether they want to be members of the Price of Football Club, I don't know. I did switch. I probably told you this, Kieran. I was asked to switch on the lights at Palace once, the Christmas lights.
No, they didn't tell me this.
No, I was asked to. They were honest enough to say John Solarco wasn't available. So could I come down and turn on the lights? It turned out to be the Christmas lights in the club shop, and it literally involved me putting the plug in and flicking the switch. We were in the Championship in those days. Let's get on to some. I was going to say hard news, Kieran, but £3.99 a month for that's hard news. That's going to be news at 10 tonight. Idiots give away loads of content for £3.99 a month. Time for the conspiracy theorists to kick into full action, Kieran, because it seems finally that they've got through all 115 breaches in the Man City case.
Yes, and the first thing to note is that it appears to be 130 charges. I think they managed to find some down the back of the sofa. So there are more than 115 charges, but as we've said on more than one occasion, it's broadly three things: artificially inflating income, artificially hiding costs, and not cooperating with the Premier League investigation. So both sides have given evidence. Then they went away, probably to count some money. And then they came back for the concluding remarks by both, effectively, the prosecution and the defence. Manchester City, of course, and the defendants here. So the commission is now going to retire and consider the evidence. There are hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of documents. If I'd been working for a photocopier company, I would be a very, very rich person. In terms of the verdict, clearly you've got the three-person commission, and they will be senior people from legal background. They have to go away and reflect on the evidence. They have to decide who has the greater weight of evidence. And then, of course, they've got to give a judgment on each of the individual charges separately. So it's not going to be a rush decision. I've read some of the reports that the Premier League would like to get the verdict out as soon as possible, but the Premier League's not in a position to dictate terms. As far as the outcome is concerned, if the Premier League is successful with all of the charges, or the vast majority of the charges, then this would have to be deemed to be a major breach of Premier League rules. It's effectively fraud, and that will come with, I think, very significant repercussions, both in financially. There would have to be a significant fine. There would also be an on-pitch sanction, and I think that would be a very significant points deduction, because if we go back to the Nottingham Forest and Everton judgments, that was a fairly narrow remit in terms of the charges, and that resulted in points deductions. But it was also noticeable, I think, the key thing I picked up from reading the Forest verdict was they specifically said in the commission, this is a minor breach of rules, and yet we're still giving you a four-point deduction. So we are going to be talking double digits. We are going to be talking big double digits as well. And whether that's enough to force relegation. Now, some people have said, could this result in Manchester City being demoted to League Two? Um, we saw Rangers being relegated, 3 divisions in Scotland 10, 12 years ago. That won't be the case because Manchester City have not broken any of the EFL's rules. And given that relationships between the EFL and the Premier League are pretty hostile, there's no way that the Premier League could say, we're going to demote you into somebody else's competition and we're going to dictate where that is. So it's likely to be a points deduction rather than a relegation, but it could be a points deduction which is so severe that it effectively guarantees relegation.
I was going to ask you to clarify the relegation issue because even last night on Sky, they were speculating as to the outcome of this and suggesting that relegation was this. So I don't think you can say it loudly enough, Kieran, that essentially the EFL and the Premier League are separate legal entities in a way that Scottish football isn't. Scottish football is under one umbrella, so there is scope for demoting. Right? There is no scope for relegating Man City, although, as you say, a 100-point deduction would effectively do that. But one of the sanctions that isn't available is relegation. I think people need to be aware of that. And just secondly, Kieran, on the way that the charges are scrutinised by the three-person commission, is it literally a case of going, right, number 1, number 2, or are they clustered together? So it's like 1 to 7 a particular charge, and being guilty of one would essentially mean you're guilty of all 7, so to speak.
Yes, given that the charges are in season 2011-12, you failed to correctly disclose sponsorship revenues from Etihad Airways, and it's likely to be in season 12-13 and 13-14. So I think it would be very difficult to find them guilty of one part of the cluster and not the other. But it could be that you're guilty in terms of an Etihad sponsorship, but there's insufficient evidence to find the club guilty of another sponsorship arrangement. So that part will be separated. I think the worst case scenario for the Premier League would be if Manchester City are found guilty of some of the charges, but when you actually work out the financial benefit to Manchester City. So let's say that the allegation against the payments to Roberto Mancini, and the allegation is that Roberto Mancini was being paid off payroll. He was being paid by a club in Saudi Arabia. Well, in Abu Dhabi. That's £2 million. Well, that might not actually have meant that Manchester City were in breach of FFP as it was then, now PSR. So therefore, given that they wouldn't have been over the limit, can you give the club a points deduction on that basis? So that, it could get really messy. I think also, if Manchester City successfully defend the position, and there has been very much a lockdown in terms of what's coming out. The only thing that I've heard, talking to 1 or 2 lawyers, they say they've seen the Manchester City cases coming out who appear to be smiling a lot. Now, it could be they're smiling a lot because they're being paid an absolute fortune, and they're going, I'm going home to look at buying an island or something like that. So I think people are trying to read so much into absolutely nothing. But from Premier League's point of view, if Manchester City successfully defend these charges, it really means that the Premier League board of directors will have to consider their positions, because the legal costs are going to be somewhere in the region of 50 to 60 million pounds, I would imagine, per party. Having a quick look at the Premier League handbook, it looks as if each party has to pay up for their own sets of charges. There is scope, I think, within the commission for them to award legal costs against one of the parties. But for all we know, it could be that the Premier League and City have said, look, we're not friends, but we're not going to double the burden on the loser. So whoever wins bears their legal costs, and we just take it on the chin. Equally, the board of Manchester City, I think their position would be untenable if Manchester City lose the case, because it is an accusation of fraud. It's misrepresentation of financial data. And from a governance point of view, the people who have made statements to the commission, their reputation will be shot to bits.
Apparently, Kieran, I do a very good wry smile, or some people say sarcastic smile, Kieran. But nevertheless, when you read every single journalist saying the outcome is not expected to the new year, then you can't help but go, well, you're not winning the Pulitzer Prize with that information, are you? But you said that the Premier League, of course, are keen for this to be resolved as quickly as possible. Is that because they would look to impose any massive points deduction this season? Because if so, it would surely be deferred on appeal anyway, wouldn't it?
Well, I think there are very limited grounds for appeal. It would effectively have to be that Manchester City's defence team can say that there was something wrong with the conduct within the commission itself.
I see. Okay.
But that doesn't mean slim grounds for appeal, doesn't mean zero grounds for appeal. And there's separate issues in that if Manchester City's hearing is going to be heard, we don't know what's happening in respect of Everton, because there's a separate hearing apparently going to be taking place with regards to Everton's interest charges. And there is no news coming out of the Premier League for Chelsea, and Chelsea's unusual transactions involving property sales and potentially the sale of the women's team, which would appear to me to be within the rules. The only issue is there could be some fair value observations. How much is the women's football team worth? If you've got a friendly buyer, it's a lot easier to get a big price for it. How much is a painting worth? I do think you've got a problem when you've got unique assets trying to give some form of bespoke valuation to them.
Well, we now know that a banana gaffer tape to a wall is worth $4 million, Kieran, because some idiot's willing to pay $4 million in what was obviously a publicity scam.
This episode is brought to you by Global X. Since 2008, Global X ETFs has been committed to empowering investors with unexplored, intelligent solutions. Global X specializes in exchange-traded funds that offer exposure to the artificial intelligence ecosystem, including themes like data centers, robotics, semiconductors, and cloud computing. To learn more about Global X's entire suite of ETFs, from covered calls, fixed income, emerging markets, and more, visit globalxetfs.com.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be.
I was at a Palace for Life Foundation meeting last week, Kieran, and somebody from the club hinted that there was some new broadcasting money coming the way of the Premier League, and then in full Hagrid fashion, probably so. I probably shouldn't have said that. But this here's the news that he's absolutely right.
That's right, and you've got to give the Premier League a huge amount of credit for the ability to go into existing markets. So this has come from the Far East, and it came from posting. Martin Ziegler wrote this in the Times. It came from, I think, the losing party, who was a broadcaster who were quoted on, I think it's the Thailand Stock Exchange, and they say, yeah, we bid for the rights for Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia. You think, okay, they're big countries in their own right, but to get a deal, I think is an achievement. And we'll be talking about other countries and their deals a wee bit later. But It's worth $560 million over 6 years. It's for three countries. The Premier League is broadcast to 190 countries around the world, and this came from, I think, from the losing broadcaster, who says this might have an impact on us, because what broadcasters have found is that the Premier League is the product which stops people cutting the cord, stops them from cancelling their subscriptions. And football subscriptions in the main are very, very expensive. It's not like price of football club at the very, very reasonable price of £3.99 a month, for example.
Well, if a lot of people around the world are watching the Premier League, Kieran, there's a league that very few people seem to be watching.
Yes, that is the Saudi Pro League. It turns out that this came from an analysis of French TV. I think it is Canal Plus, or Canal Plus, as we might say in France. That they broadcast one of Cristiano Ronaldo's matches, which you'd expect that to be the main one, and it got viewing figures of 4,000, which is less than they're getting for the third tier of French football. And no disrespect to French football, it's not like the pyramid here. If we take a look at League One here, we've got the big clubs. We've got Birmingham, we've got Wrexham, Stockport. There are plenty of clubs, Charlton and so on, plenty of clubs who will get really decent attendances and people. So the Saudi Pro League had put out a sort of a press release a few months ago to say, well, Saudi Pro League can now be seen in 160 different countries. I've asked her. Admittedly, it's a small it's a small selection. I've asked my mates on WhatsApp groups, anybody watched anything from the Saudi Pro League? No. I don't know a soul that's done it, and my WhatsApp groups are all football fans. So the Saudi Pro League said, well, last year 200 million people watched Saudi Pro League, and you go, well, hold on, you've got a 12-team division. You look at the number, you've got 200 matches taking place over the course of the season. Then you've got the domestic viewing. So by the time you actually work out how many people are watching matches in individual jurisdictions, it's not going to be big. If you take a look at attendances for the Saudi Pro League, less than half the teams are getting attendances of people physically attending of more than 5,000. 5,000 is not bad, but if we're honest, that's sort of what you're expecting at League One, League Two level. And the lowest club, the lowest attendances, average attendances, are around about 600, which is, that is National League, not even National League itself. It'll be National League North or South, or even perhaps below that. So we've got this paradox as far as the Saudi Pro League is concerned, in that when it comes to salaries, 3 of the highest 4 paid players in the world are playing in the Saudi Pro League, but it doesn't seem to be generating global interest. So I think what the aim of the Saudi Pro League was to try to build up interest in the product by recruiting Galactico players. So they've got Benzema, they've got Sadio Mane, they've got Cristiano Ronaldo. Of course, I think those are those three particular players. But it doesn't seem to be generating interest. Unlike, we're recording this show on Wednesday, and it looks like today is going to be the coronation. It's not going to be a vote, Kevin. It's going to be a coronation for the awarding of the next 2 World Cups. Don Gianni, as I think he should be known, is not taking any questions with regards to the World Cup. There's not even going to be a formal vote. It's all going to be done online. As a pure coincidence, FIFA recently announced a global sponsorship deal with a company called Aramco for $100 million a year. Yeah. That's just a coincidence.
Yeah, I suppose what the Saudis could do to try and improve match day attendance is encourage women to go on. Oh no, that 4,000 figure, Kieran, I mean, here, that 4,000 viewing figure would officially be naught, because that's not enough to even register on the radar or whatever they call it now. So that's an incredible figure. But it doesn't. That's not why they're doing it, Kieran, as we've discussed, ad nauseam. Basically, the Saudis are not doing it to build up their pro league to become the best football league in the world, are they? But I was relieved, Kieran, that quite a few newspapers and news outlets this weekend did carry the story about the FIFA report.
Yes,
into as we discussed, and the fact that FIFA are refusing to pay compensation to workers killed in the building of stadia. So I'm pleased that has started to get some traction around the world. Not that it's going to shame Infantino into doing anything, but when we first started this pod, Kieran, 5 years ago, when everything was free to air because there's only 20 people listening, I used to get excited. If I announced that a club was being bought by an American consortium, I always assumed it was good news, and then you would give me your full yes. So I don't know if this is good news for Sheffield United fans or not. So I'm going to say it's neutral news, Kieran, for Sheffield United fans.
I'm going to be a bit more positive than that, and the reason why I say that is that Sheffield United have been in limbo for quite a period of time. They admit we've just been talking about Saudi Pro League. Well, they probably do have Saudi ownership. I think there is a perception in this country that everybody in Saudi Arabia is a multi-millionaire. That is not the case. So there has been, first of all, an ongoing dispute which has now been resolved for a couple of years with relation to the Prince. Sheffield United, I think it's Kevin McCabe was the other party, and that was sorted. But the club has been up for sale for a good few years, and it now looks like we are getting closer to a deal. But you always have to be careful with consortiums, because I'm aware of another club which was subject to a bid from an American's consortium, and during the owners and directors test conducted, I'll say by the EFL, so it narrows it down to 72, one of 72 clubs. It turns out that looks like one of the owners, or one of the prospective owners, wasn't going to pass. That meant that there was a funding gap, which meant that the deal gets delayed. So the more people you have involved in a consortium, the slower the process. But my understanding is that we are making progress in terms of Sheffield United. And first of all, Wilder's done a great job this season. They after not exactly covering the club in glory in the Premier League last year, they're looking a hell of a lot better. And they've got a good chance of going up. That will impact upon the price. But I think the reason why I say I'm broadly positive about this is that it gives you a degree of certainty. If you've got a house which is up for sale, the last thing you're going to do is put in a new kitchen. The last thing you're going to do is give the place a lick of paint. You're going to try to cut your costs to the bare minimum, which means that it does have a negative impact on what's available to the club fans in terms of infrastructure, and also potentially on the pitch. Although I say that they're having a pretty damn good season this year.
Yeah, it strikes me, Kieran. I mean, I say this about a lot of clubs. The way I talk, the Premier League should have about 50 clubs in it, but it does strike me that both Sheffield United and Sheffield Wednesday should be Premier League staples, basically, given their history, their size of their fan base, etc. So presumably this consortium would want to buy Sheffield United now while it's still a championship price, rather than in May when it's likely to be a Premier League price. But what would that price be, do you think, Kieran, roughly?
Well, we have seen a significant increase in the prices which are being quoted. Remember, we saw last year Ipswich, when they were a Championship club, going for £100 million. Given that Sheffield United still have another year of parachute payments to come, I would say that it would be in excess of 100 million plus a potential bonus should they be promoted.
And for those conspiracy theorists, Kieran, who want the day off the Man City story, it's going to be another American-owned club in the Premier League next year. We're heading towards no relegation. Meanwhile, Kieran, the Everton takeover has gone very quiet. Now, I think in some circumstances that could be good news, but is it?
I was in conversation with, and I don't want this. This is me sounding as though I'm a bit ITK on this. I had a long chat with somebody very, very recently, and I've spoken to a couple of other parties as well. I think we've got a 50-50 chance of the Everton deal being concluded pre-Christmas. So I think which would be fantastic news for Everton fans. Yeah. And it also seems that the Friedkin Group are acting like adults in terms of the finances. So I think one of the concerns that many people have with Everton is that Everton have borrowed from quite a few parties. So we've got the mysterious rights and media funding, which has put in, I think, around about £160 million, could be a wee bit more. You've got 777, whilst they're no longer bidders, because they've gone bust, it looks like their debt has been transferred to an organisation called ACAP. Now, from what we're hearing, and this comes from an article by David Hellier, who writes for Bloomberg, so Bloomberg tend to have very good sources, that Friedkin Group are wanting to consolidate all of the debt. There has been talk about JP Morgan being involved. JP Morgan were the advisors to the Glazer family. We go back to 2005. Ed Woodward came from JP Morgan as well. So sort of consolidating the loans, rescheduling payments, and just trying to make things a bit tighter. Also, Friedkin Group have lent money to Everton Football Club itself. They took over a loan from a party called MSP, and there's so many people involved, it starts to get very complicated. I think it would be great from Everton's point of view if the Friedkin Group converted their loans into shares, because now that we've got this APT ruling coming through in January, I think you've got to, if you want to convert your loans and have no interest charged, you've got to do that by, I think it's the 15th of January. So if you reduce the loans, that reduces the interest which goes into your PSR calculations. We'll have to wait and see on that. There's still an outstanding issue in the sense that nominally Farhad Mashiri has around about £450 million of loans. I think he simply has to write those off as part of the overall deal to hand over Everton, because the club will never be in a position to repay that. And if he doesn't do that, we don't know how the Premier League is going to treat those loans. Again, there could be this interest cost coming through, which would be unnecessary. So yes, I'm feeling positive, and I've got to say it's a feeling. But we are now in a position where we do talk to people and listen. That's the important thing. And there certainly appears to be a positive weight of opinion that we got a good 50-50 chance of it coming through this before Christmas.
So this is actually a gigantic version of one of those consolidate all your debts into one easy loan offer that banks used to. Well, they've stopped offering me a long time ago, Kieran, obviously, but it's as simple as that. You say they're acting like adults. They're getting everything under one umbrella, and it'll be one payment a month or however it works.
That's right, and because the Friedkin Group are involved and they do have a good reputation, they should be able to borrow money at a lower rate of interest. Because whenever anybody lends, they do a credit check and that you charge people accordingly. So I do think that it is a positive. A, I think some of the debts will go down, and B, lower rate of interest. My only concern is that there could be some exit clauses from the existing lenders, and it's I remember when I used to have a fixed rate mortgage. And if interest rates went down, you go, well, I'd like to move to a lower fixed rate mortgage. But you read the small print, you say, well, if we're going to charge you 6 months interest or something like that. So, we don't know the minutiae of the calculations, but I think Everton are in a much better place, and they've got the new stadium coming through for next season, where they'll be generating more match day income. And I know from an Evertonian's point of view, and I was privileged to speak to the Everton shareholders group. They said there will be a bit of nostalgia, but we are in 2024, and it'll be nice to have different facilities, and it very quickly becomes home. Having
of course.
moved grounds.
Yeah.
So don't be held by nostalgia.
Although you do have to feel sorry for those many people who've been saving up for years to come and see the last ever Liverpool Everton game at Goodison.
Yes,
and won't be able to come back again. You mentioned, Kieran, the 777 debt being transferred to ACAP. Does that mean ACAP will have bought that debt? Will they have paid 777 the money they were owed?
I think there are complications. I think 777 owed ACAP some money, so it is part of a much broader issue.
Okay, right. Okay.
777 are a mess, but we were trying to very politely say that without being explicit. I don't want to, when 777 were potential bidders. Certainly, the briefings we were getting from people in the world of finance is it will be an absolute disaster.
You used the phrase "acting like adults," Kieran, which brings us to Manchester United. Discuss. This in another week, Kieran. This would arguably be the biggest story of the week, but I think Man United have been the biggest story of the week so often, and you're getting enough angry emails from that direction as it happens. I've rarely seen Gary Neville as angry as he was on interviews this week with the Dan Ashworth situation. I presume there's no other way. It's a sacking, Kieran. There's a chap from the Athletic who was on Match of the Day 2 on Sunday night who said you can use the phrase mutual agreement as much as you want. It's essentially a sacking, and presumably this is going to cost Man United a fortune.
Yes. So just to sort of give a broader analysis of the story, Manchester United approached Newcastle United with a view to recruiting Dan Ashworth. Newcastle said, we'd like to keep Dan. Dan Ashworth made it clear he wanted to leave. So he went on gardening leave, and then an agreement was reached between the two parties. Newcastle apparently were originally asking for 20 million. They didn't get that. There are various reports going out, and this is where we get selective briefing. Manchester United are briefing, we didn't pay more than £2 to £3 million. The noise is coming out of Newcastle. Actually, it was closer to 5. Manchester United's recently quarterly accounts didn't say anything. Dan Ashworth's name wasn't included in it, and yet it seems strange because they did say that sacking Ten Hag, there was a cost of 11.4 million. This was after Ineos had extended his contract a couple of months earlier. The cost of recruiting the new manager was a further 10 million, but not a dicky bird in relation to Ashworth. So yes, I agree entirely that there is no way that this is mutually agreed. It was quite clearly where the direction of travel was concerned. And in my view, and let's be honest, we've been contacted by current and former members of staff at Old Trafford, giving us stories about the conduct of Ineos. And look, it's not a charity, as a proportion of the Manchester United fan base get very angry and start. The trouble is, if it's not a charity, then you can't moan about them putting up ticket prices. So be careful what you wish for. Also, when we've had some of our live shows, they've been attended by people with Manchester, and the stories we've heard are horrendous, and we're not going to put them out in public. It's not our job to do so. The conduct of Ineos is not what you would expect from a people-based industry. It's fine in petrochemicals in the sense that you are trying to produce a product, you're trying to produce a product as cheaply as possible, and you're going to sell that to another market. But they've got Dave Brailsford's come in. I think his management style is politely described as combative. So I think he's and his background's in cycling. So he could do for Manchester United what Clive Woodward did for Southampton when he moved from being a very successful a rugby person to I can't remember how many trophies Southampton won with Clive Woodward around, but I'm an old man. My memory's not what it was.
Yeah. What you need is a spreadsheet, a Southampton Woodward Trophy spreadsheet.
Perhaps I should set that up. Yes,
it'll be a small one.
Meaningless stuff. Why do we gift so much meaningless stuff? Tired of generic gifts and hollow trends? Shutterfly allows you to create meaningful photo gifts for your family and friends. Whether it's a cozy fleece blanket for grandma, a stunning canvas print for mom, or a mug to make dad smile. Enjoy 40% off with code MAKE40 at Shutterfly.com and make something meaningful this year. See site for more details.
How do you feel great on vacation? Like really good? Easy. You go to Aruba. You'll spend your time relaxing on cool white sand beaches and floating in healing blue water. You'll immerse yourself in natural wonder and find your center on an island where things move at your speed. You won't just feel great, you'll feel relaxed, renewed, and ready for life. That's the Aruba effect. Plan your trip at Aruba.com.
I can't stress enough, Kieran, to those Man United fans who seem to think that we've got it in for the club. That's the opposite. We're on the side of the Man United fans here. What we're against is this bloke who doesn't. And it might be in 5 years' time when Man United have won the Champions League, everyone looks back and goes, well, he was a tough man. He made tough decisions and they've paid off. But at the moment, let's say United are right and they did pay Newcastle £2 million, right, for Dan Ashworth's services. And let's say they've paid him £2 million to go away. And that's probably less than this. But that's £4 million. That's not a good look in the week where you've raised the minimum ticket price to £66. All right, and it might not seem a lot of money in the general scheme of football finance, but the other thing, and it's to Jim Ratcliffe's credit that he gave an interview to a Man United fanzine, but within that, and this was a phrase that I thought really summed up the situation for me, where he talked about the cost of ticket prices, and he said you can't have a situation where Fulham are charging more for a matchday ticket than Manchester United. So there's an element there of macho pride. It's like, we have, if Fulham are charging that, we have to charge more because we're a bigger club than Fulham, which shows no indication of the economic situation of the people in that part of the world. It shows no regard for the traditional fan. It shows no interest in new young. He doesn't care who he sells his tickets to, as long as he's charging more than Fulham.
Well, that's right, and also as a Chelsea season ticket holder for many years, Jim will know how much prices are in London. Yeah, that did seem a strange comment. I moved to Manchester in 1980, and one of the things that I noted when I first moved there was that going to watch, I used to watch Manchester United and Manchester City. Yeah, I could go to the Stretford, and I was a student. I could afford to go stand in the Kippax one week and stand in the Stretford End the following week, and that was absolutely brilliant for a football fan like me. And then on a Friday night, I'd be at Tranmere or Stockport or so on. It was football heaven. You can't do that today as a young person, that's for sure. And going back to Dan Ashworth, how is this going to be funded? And again, let's take a look at the optics. In the same week that there's going to be, and Manchester United will have to give him a settlement, unless Dan Ashworth did resign, which I don't think was the case. They're going to have to give him a settlement by all accounts. It turns out that Manchester United are scrapping the £100 Christmas bonus they give to staff and replacing that with a £40 Marks and Spencer's card. Well, what happens if you don't like shopping in Marks and Spencer's? There's savings there. The optics don't look good. There's reports coming out that Sir Matt Busby, and if you take a look at the success of Manchester United, it comes down to two men: Sir Matt Busby and what he created, and Sir Alex Ferguson and what he created to restore Manchester United to its former preeminent position. Sir Alex Ferguson has been stripped of his position as an ambassador for the club. And it now appears that Sir Matt Busby's family, who have had season tickets since Sir Matt passed away, he passed away a long time ago. It looked like Ineos were trying to scrap those. And to Sir Alex's credit, he said, this is a step too far. And I think they've been shifted. But we've seen Norman Whiteside be shifted. And what they're trying to do is to free up more of the expensive seats. Okay, if those Manchester United fans who say it's not a charity, fine. Well, then presumably they think that Sir Matt Busby's family have done nothing for Manchester United, and perhaps they should be scrapped. But where do we stop in terms of this dogma-driven, and that's what it is dogma, agenda-driven obsession with cutting costs that works in petrochemicals, that works in certain industries, absolutely. But in an industry where motivation is a key element of performance, if you compare the approach taken by Manchester United to other clubs that we are aware of, whereby it's very inclusive, and I think that was an issue with Dan Ashworth. He always said he's sort of the centre of the hub, and he listens to people. Okay, Ineos aren't interested in listening because they are dogma driven. That it is their way or the highway, and it just looks really ugly. If Ineos were more than happy to send 3 senior members of staff in 3 separate private jets to extend Ten Hag's contract over the course of the summer, then what appears to be cost cutting is aimed at certain areas of the employees of Manchester United, and it's one rule for the rich and another rule for Dave and Sandra from Gorton, who've been at the club for 20 or 30 years.
Can you imagine, Kieran, the owners of Liverpool saying, those Shankly gates, they take a lot of polishing, don't they? It's taken us far too much money and time to get the polish for those gates. We're going to replace them with just bog standard. What Man United need to realise is part of the reason that they are still one of the biggest clubs in the world is that every year you have a new generation of fans around the world who learn about the history of Man United, who learn about Matt Busby and the Busby Babes and Munich and George Best and Bobby. And that's the reason they're attracted to the club in the first place. The history is part of the appeal. Don't muck about with Matt Busby's family. It's just... See, that was Ali storming out. She was furious to even hear me turn it. Not far. I know my geography is not brilliant, but I do know that Preston isn't not far from Manchester. Their latest accounts are out. Kieran, good, bad?
As expected for a club in the Championship, which means bad. That in the sense that on £17 million of revenue, they lost £14 million. So, they had 31 million. For every £100 worth of money coming into Preston North End, £130 went out on wages. And that's actually an improvement compared to some of the recent years. And I do think this reflects the frightening cost of being a member of that particular club, it's not good value like the £3.99 you can get for a monthly fee for the price of football club, for example. Yeah, being a championship club, you are losing on average between £300,000 to £400,000 a week. There was an open letter from a section of the Preston North End fan base, sort of expressing grumblings of unhappiness. I think a lot of this is directed towards Peter Ridsdale, rather than the Hemmings family himself. And we know that Trevor Hemmings died a few years ago, but his family have continued to put in, broadly, £1 million a month. Yeah, and that's a subsidy. Yeah, that's not an investment. That is a subsidy for the way that the clubs are run. And I think Preston are caught in this spiral that many other clubs of what I'd say are similar size. Millwall, for example. In terms of the size of the fan base, the number of people they can get coming, whereby they are being funded. They don't have enough money necessarily to be competitive towards the top end of the championship to potentially to get into a playoffs, and the fans have got into that sort of where do we go from here? It does appear to be that they're sort of on a hamster wheel of nothing particularly exciting. And there's other clubs who have been through similar. So I think the fans want change. I suspect these accounts were published at the behest of some of the senior members of staff at Preston North End to say, look, these are the state of the finances. What do you expect us to do with this degree of revenue coming in? But it's not a happy bunny. My understanding, and again, there's an element of speculation on this because I hear it from when we get contacted by journalists. My understanding is that Preston North End is up for sale, but then I could say that with to probably around about 50 to 60 clubs out of the 92 at present. And it only takes the nature of the championship. You get 3 or 4 wins on the bounce, and you go from 14th to 8th, and all of a sudden the enthusiasm for the club from the fan base changes. But it's very difficult for Preston to generate more fans because, as we spoke on the question show earlier this week, the Northwest, Lancashire in particular, you've got these individual towns which have modest populations, and you are effectively constrained by geographical circumstance.
Yeah. With reluctance, Kieran, let's get on to this week's Reading story, and another punch in the face for a club that's already on the ropes.
Yes. Rob Cohig, who is the former Wickham owner, I think he tried to buy Reading over the course of the summer, and the deal fell through. Now, at the time, he'd lent Reading £4 million. He got his money back from the Michael Elise sale by Palace to Bayern Munich. But it now appears that he is putting in a compensation claim for, and this is what I find strange, loss of profits. He said if the deal had gone through, I would have made some money. Now, it could be that he would have made some money from some real estate. Reading does have some attractive real estate. But looking at Reading's most recent accounts, and that means I have to go back to 2022 because the owner, Dai Yonga, refuses to publish the 2023 accounts, that the club was losing huge amounts of money on an annual basis. I just wonder whether this compensation claim is similar to what we saw from Rob Cohig, and Rob's been on the show. When Derby County were in administration. Now, what the Derby County administrators were wanting to sell was a known product, or all of the assets of Derby County, and that's allowed David Clowes to come in, knows exactly what he buys. And Rob Cohig apparently put in a compensation claim on behalf of Wycombe Wanderers to say that Derby had breached FFP rules, and Wycombe were relegated on the final day of the season to League One, so he put in a claim for compensation. Now, we've never managed to determine whether that has been settled out of court or not. It's certainly been some form of lockdown. Could this be that he's put in a £10 million claim to make things even more awkward for the sale of Reading Football Club by Die Younger? Because prospective buyers will not want to buy the football club. It's a bit like if you're buying. I always give a house analogy. If you're buying a house and there's a dispute with the neighbour over, fences have broken, fences have been blown down in the most recent storm, and whose responsibility is it to put it up? And the neighbour's saying, well, we're going to put a legal claim against. You want certainty. So is this an attempt to get an out-of-court settlement before the Reading deal goes through to make it that much easier for Die Younger to sell the club? Younger's got issues in that he can't get money out of China itself. I believe he's now living with his sister, who he did buy the club with, and I think he fell out with his sister when she realised just how much money Reading was costing the pair of them. So, yeah, we hope to have a chat, something Reading based, later this week. So we might, if we clarify that, we'll be putting that as a separate podcast.
Yeah, hopefully that will come through to the mutual benefit of both of us, Kieran. By which I mean the podcast and the person Reading-based that might be talking to us. If he's done this, Kieran, to make the sale of Reading more complicated and hopefully get a bit of a payoff to go, that's a very cynical move, is it not? Could it be a chance that the claim is that if he bought Reading, he would then have sold Wycombe for a profit? Because I'd rather it was the second than the first, because I like him. We've met him a couple of times. I liked him. I don't like to think that this is just a deliberate attempt to muddy the waters even further for Reading.
Well, he's a lawyer, so he will know the consequences of putting in a compensation claim. We still don't know what happened in terms of Wycombe. We do know what happened. There was also a separate legal dispute between Derby County and Middlesbrough, and by all accounts, if we take a look at Mel Morris, who got a fair amount of flack from me during the conduct of his ownership, I give him credit for settling that one out of court with Middlesbrough. And he took the hit on that.
Yeah, I only say this, Kieran, to annoy all the lawyers I know, but when you said he's a lawyer, I assumed that stopped then, because you're just implying that there's nothing evil that they're not capable of, which is my assumption. Talking of lawyers, Kieran, Charlton Athletic could find themselves in court.
Yes. Charlton have been through a merry-go-round of ownership issues. There was De Chachelet, there was Thomas Sangard, and quite a few people came in potentially by. There's a guy called Paul Elliott, not the footballer, Paul Elliott. I think Paul Elliott actually Paul Elliott was a great player, who is now saying he is owed £500,000. And I think this was connected to, again, I think lending money to the club when he was part of a consortium that was thinking of buying the club, and this was giving it working capital. So this is going through the High Court. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be messy. It's a £500,000 claim, and again, this is why you need to have everything resolved whenever there is a transaction. Certainly, I'm aware of when I used to do administration work. One of the things we were always keen on was to exactly know what we were selling to a new party, and I remember one particular where we were told dozens of times by the old management that this asset is owned by the company, so therefore we sold that asset. Turns out that the paperwork which they couldn't find was due to the fact that the paperwork didn't exist, and we had to go and stump up to settle that deal privately. So this is why you're always trying to get certainty, because who exactly is Paul Elliott going to try to recover that money from? Is there going to be now a claim between Charlton's new owners and the old owners, and more work for the lawyers? It just gets very messy.
Two more stories to go, Kieran. One funnier than the other. The first one, despite what I said about Sheffield United new owners being neither good news nor bad news, this could be finally some good news for Dunfermline fans.
Yes, a guy called James Board, which is nearly, I read that as James Bond, first of all, so I did get quite excited. James Board is a former professional poker player. That's not necessarily a bad thing as a Brighton fan, given where we are. It looks like he could be involved. He runs a company called Short Circuit Science. So he's an entrepreneur, a tech entrepreneur, and America's tech industry is doing superbly well. It's one of the biggest drivers. I've spoken before about the success of the US economy. It's growing far faster than Europe. It's growing far faster than the UK, and that is very much on the back of tech. So he has been successful. He's one of the interested parties, and it's a good news story from a media perspective, because they like the idea of a poker player buying into a football club. If that is a success, we wish him all the best. He'd be more than welcome to come on the show. The important thing is that we have a Dunfermline Athletic to talk about. Because there is a limited amount of time that the administrators can run a club, because they're not paying the bills out of their own money. I think there has been a fundraising, and they did inherit a bit of cash as well. But even so, it's very messy, and there have been some quite dark elements to the reasons why Dunfermline Athletic have gone into administration.
Yeah, our final story, Kieran. I mean, to paraphrase Oscar Wilde, to slip over just outside your own penalty box once might be considered misfortune. To do it twice. So I think we all had you in particular, Kieran, would have had a good old chuckle. Your ex-player playing now for the club you like the least, falling over twice and then dramatically gesturing at his boots. But he may regret that, Kieran.
That's right. Puma are bringing out a new range of boots. Those boots are costing 220 notes. Mark Cucurella, who is a very good footballer, his ethics are a separate discussion issue, but so yes, he was at fault for those two opening goals. He then spectacularly threw the boots into a bin, photographed it, and stuck it out on social media. But it looks like he was going to be one of the brand ambassadors. Now, how Puma are going to feel about this? Because he's effectively trashed the reputation of their new product, and they will have put a lot of work into developing that. So there is there's sort of an ethics or conduct or bad will clause that you will have if you sign up with a boots deal. And I'm not sure that Mark Cucurella will be getting a check from Puma as a result of his actions, because I can't see anybody wanting to buy those boots, because he's quite publicly blamed the boot rather than anything else. And it could be that the boots, there was something, perhaps he'd chosen the wrong length of stud, or he hadn't screwed in his stud. Not that you have you don't have screw-in studs anymore, do you, on football boots? But it does show that actions have consequences in the world of social media, and it was a funny post by him, but he subsequently deleted it, and I suspect he deleted it when his agent said, "Mark, you do know how much Puma are potentially going to pay you for wearing those boots." We've had a little whisper in our ear to say that they're not very impressed.
Yeah, we were before the Palace Man City game on Saturday in the Parsons Arms. We were, I was going to say, talking to a young person, but a young person involved in his 30s, and we were telling him about the football boots he used to be able to buy with revolving studs.
Oh, yes.
Revolving studs, which he was horrified by because he's of a medical background. He's going to do your ligaments in. But then was into, because his next question was, what colour were they? And I was like, what? Black.
Yeah, exactly.
Black. All boots they're just black. Life was so much easier then.
Remember when Alan Ball?
Yeah, the white boots. God.
That was a major incident at school. That was, wasn't it?
Tell me about it. It's a major incident for my dad. That was up there with Keith Weller wearing tights, as far as my dad was concerned. God rest his soul. Peter Bonetti wearing gloves, white football boots with revolving studs. Game's gone.
Game's gone.
Thanks to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. Now, if you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod, and it is small, oh my God, it is small, you can go to our website, priceoffootball.com, and follow the links to join the Price of Football Club. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter, X, and you can find us on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to buy our book or see us live, you can find details on our website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Tuesday with our regular questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
As always, thanks to everybody who's been in contact, especially those people who have been chatting to me about... I managed to get hold of a Dukla Prague football shirt, which is the home shirt.
Yeah.
But the number of listeners to this podcast, if we did a Venn diagram of half man, half biscuit fans and listeners to POF, there's very significant overlap. But it was great to see that just so many people have a love for one of the world's greatest bands. But there's ways of supporting the show, and we are excited about Price of Football Club, and will allow us to put out more content. We do have a backlog of questions, so it will help us to address that, and also to answer the question. And we're also quite looking forward to doing a sort of a live Q&A. And we could be very current about whatever you've got in mind to ask us then. And we always have fun when we do the Q&A at the live shows as well. But there is another way to support the club. And we are conscious that times are hard. So if you just want to say something nice about us, that will help us as well in terms of the reputation of the club. And that's to give us a review of the podcast. Just go onto your app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and give us a review. By all accounts, it doesn't matter what you say. So, in honour of Half Man, Half Biscuit, you could even say you would rather have the show presented by Neris Hughes and Fred Titmus. It wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to us.
Oh, there's Neris Hughes. There you go. That's a man of a certain age sighing.
That's right.
Fred Titmus is a man of a certain age sighing.
Yes.
Well, I'd like to get a Half Man, Half Biscuit / Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine vibe going. Get them to host a pod between them. That'd be we'd 3/4 of our listenership would lap that up, Kieran, wouldn't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.